Hey everyone, I'm here to talk to you about PriceWise. It's a community-built grocery price database for budget-conscious people. I'm Shiva Muthiah. Just a little bit about me first. I am a designer, developer, and photographer, and I like making things. In my personal practice, I make zines and tools to help people reflect on grief and the self. And in my professional practice, I'm interested in helping organizations, especially nonprofits, make their data more legible, accessible, and actionable. And it is through that lens that PriceWise first came about. So PriceWise makes food pricing data more legible, and it does this by aggregating it and then connecting with stores and neighborhoods. Now, before I go into talking about how PriceWise works, let me tell you a little bit about the broader problem that PriceWise is trying to solve. Now, food insecurity in New York is growing. About 1 in 4 New Yorkers already live in poverty, and a lot of them spend up to 70% of their income on food. Now, coming this to the fact that food costs have increased by over 50% in the last decade, that even folks on SNAP benefits, and I'm glad we have SNAP to bridge that gap, three out of five families sometimes talk about running out of food. Now, unfortunately, it looks like the inflation is just going to continue growing and federal funding for SNAP is changing. So all of this is going to really increase the pressure on a lot of New Yorkers. Now, fortunately, New York has a great, large, and diverse food market, but that by no means guarantees equitable outcomes because, as we all know, the market is not neutral. Some of the inflation that we've been talking about is also driven by kind of price discrimination, backroom deals, and algorithmic pricing of various kinds. I was just learning a bit more about algorithmic pricing, and there are a few additional technologies which are coming to fore, which is making them more popular. We've all heard of surge and seasonal pricing. We've heard of like kind of surge pricing, especially in the context of services like Uber and so on. But now a lot of large retailers are deploying e-ink tags. So that means that they can update prices for their goods all across their store in just a few seconds. Now they are also partnering with data brokers and so on, harvesting data from outside, which means your data from other purchases you made at other stores, pricing across the neighborhood, your browsing history, and data from ad networks. All of this is coming together. Some of it's getting fed to machine learning models, and they're being using to optimize pricing. And yeah, as Eric points out, yes, loyalty programs are also another way that they like learn more about you and able to then figure out what's just the right price to charge you. Now, of course, I think a lot of these things are happening more with the larger retailers and less with the mom and pop stores. But all of this means that essentially what price you pay for something when you go to a store is not really very transparent. But there are some exceptions that we can look to. For example, the Park Slope Food Co-op, they're extremely transparent about their pricing information. Of course, you need to be a member to shop there, but they're very explicit about charging exactly a 25% markup over the wholesale price that they pay for food. A lot of other retailers charge anywhere from 30 to 80% markup over their wholesale prices. But really, this is to highlight the large kind of information asymmetry here, right? So in an ideal market, consumers are making like rational purchasing decisions using perfect information. But of course, here in the real world, we have limited time, limited money, and limited information. So it's the limited information part that PriceWise is really trying to address. And this is doing that by building up a database of pricing information from the bottom up. Now, a lot of these large retailers are, and services like, say, Instacart and DoorDash, and they buy pricing information from other kind of pricing aggregators. Those are often expensive, and we as individuals are completely locked out of that. Hence the whole idea of building a bottom-up kind of pricing database. Quick question for you folks. If this pricing information was truly open data and you could access information across the city for any stores, what would you look up? Like, how would you use this information? And this might not even just be pricing information. Like, I'd love to see which stores have bodega cats in them. Is that not enough? Yeah. Any thoughts here on the kind of information people would like to see? Yeah, I would love to know some of this pricing so I know exactly how much, like, to be able to make those choices more explicitly. Yeah, I don't mind paying $1 more if I can go for just a short walk to buy stuff and not have to go further. Yeah, SNAP information is often not available. You need to go to the stores, look for those little labels and posters. Yeah, lots of interesting questions here. Yeah, there's of course tariffs here, and often, yeah, it's hard to tell what stuff do other stores have at all in the first place. It's also a good point. How far is the food coming to get to me? What exactly is local? So again, there the Park Slope Food Co-op kind of defines like 500 miles as their sort of local deliveries, and that's about a day of truck travel. But sometimes things are flying across half the world to get here. Thank you. Yeah, these are all like really good points. There's a lot of little piece of information we could include here. Thank you. Yeah. Yes, like again, there are a bunch of chains. I would often like to support the mom and pop stores rather than going to other chains, but I often lack the information to know which one I should support. Thank you. So I just wanted to touch a little bit on where PriceWise started. So this all started when I lost my job last June, and I used to work at this large CRM company working on importing large amounts of data and stuff. But what we realized, my partner and I realized when I left was like how hard it was to compare prices across stores and that way make better decisions about where we should shop and what we should shop for different places. So I initially built PriceWise to solve that problem, but soon after that, my partner and I realized that, oh, this picture could be so much richer if we pooled this fragmented bits of information together with our neighbors, and all of us could work together to have a better idea of what we were paying for in different places. So that's broadly really the vision for PriceWise as a tool to help people make better informed purchase decisions, and really in the long run to can help support food policies that improve food equity across the city. Enough telling. Let me show you how PriceWise works and what it's like. So PriceWise is available to you today. It's a web app at pricewise.nyc. It's free. You don't need to go to an app store. Just visit pricewise.nyc in your browser. It is in beta, so expect a few small glitches, but it works well. Let me show you how it works. So this is what it looks like. You can see that it has information here about some common food items and their price ranges. And my wife and I decided this week that we would make a big pot of Thai curry, and I know we need to buy some mushrooms and coconut milk. So let me show you how I can use PriceWise to help me with that. Now here I can click view more to see many different items that are in the PriceWise database and what their price ranges are. So here I see mushrooms. I'm going to click into that. Now, this tells me a little bit about the different prices available, what their average and median prices are, but also that probably the cheapest mushrooms that are in here are at this Trader Joe's here in Forest Hills for about $2. Pretty good price. But I can also see as I scroll down that it's also available somewhere between 350 and 499 at this Flatbush Food Co-op, which is near me. So I might go buy some of these mushrooms there. But essentially, my point here is that I could use this to plan where I shop and what I buy, where I buy things. And in the future, this doesn't work yet. I will be able to filter this by, let's say, I just want to see prices in Kensington. I'll be able to just choose that and it will filter these down to just show me the stores only in Kensington. Doesn't work just yet, but that's in the works. Another way that I could use this information is by if I were actually at a store and let's say I found a can of coconut milk, it's about $3. Is that a good price or not? I could do a quick search. It instantly filters the database and shows me the prices of different items here. And I can see again, I have the store which is not far from me, which has a pretty good price, but that's not too far from at $3. But I do telco, so maybe I would go buy it from the store. So again, I can use it for a quick lookup and make quick decisions. Couple of things, other things I can do, I can create a shopping list. There's a little placeholder right now. It doesn't fully work, but something I'm working on. That's a small game. It's a bit experimental, but see if you can beat my high score. It's about 8,000. There's a little about page and some stats about the community itself and how much data there is in. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are thinking about how all of this data got here. And all of this data is added here by the community. And none of this could really work without all of this data in there. Luckily, PriceWise makes it very easy to do. All you need to do is take a photograph of your receipt and it takes care of the rest. Let me show you how that works. Now, this is designed for your phone, as you can tell, and you can just take a photograph with your phone. Let me show you how that works here. I'm going to choose this image and see a little preview. I just took a picture right as I left the co-op yesterday. So I just bought 3 items here. I hit next, and then I can search to find the store that I bought this from. I essentially search for the name of the store and the street that it's on. And that helps me quickly filter down to the store that I actually shopped at. And then I hit add receipt. And that's really all you have to do. The system takes care of the rest. It extracts all the prices and structures the information. Now, this process typically takes about 2 to 5 minutes. Oops. Looks like I have a little error because a lot of people are using it. Let's just try it again quickly. It's the first time seeing that. So yeah, like I said, it's in beta. I'm still working out a couple of glitches here. But yeah, like I said, this takes about 2 to 5 minutes, depending upon how many people are using this and how large the receipt is and so on. Let me tell you a little bit about what it's doing while this process is happening. Because while this is happening, you can go around and navigate around and it'll just work in the background. So let me show you how all of this is actually works. Now, your photograph your receipt is sent to an optical character recognition system, which takes this photograph and then pulls out all the text from it. The text is then structured using a large language model, in this case, Gemini, and this kind of splits it up into the name and the price and the quantity and the unit price and so on. And all of this is then sent to an LLM again to normalize this information. Now, you'll probably notice that every store uses slightly different naming conventions for what is exactly the same item. And so we need some way of unifying all of this so we can start comparing prices. So this normalizing process is very important for that. Now, once we have that information, that's then connected with grocery stores and neighborhoods. Now, both these data sets are there thanks to the NYC OpenData team. So kudos to them for making this data available and easily usable. And once this data is connected, then it's delivered to you as you saw in this web app. The web app is just built with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So anyone with a browser can log into it, use it anonymously. You don't need to create an account and so on. And this entire system is hosted on a Flask web server and a SQLite database, which is pretty tried and trusted openware technologies, right? So let's quickly see if the receipt is done processing. And it is. So once it's done, you can tap on it to see how well it did the scanning process. And as you can see, it sandwiches the receipt image with the information it extracted. So you can quickly scan through vertically to see if it got the prices right. And you can see it's taken things like OG and expanded it to organic and things like that so that you can compare it across stores. So it looks like it all looks right. But if I wanted to change something, I could just click on it and I can update this price here. But this all looks good. So I'm going to leave it be and hit done. So the data is now in the database and can be searched and looked at by others. So that's how it all works. So feel free to use it and try it out. I don't know about you, but I'm ready to take a short little break. So there's a little kind of Price is Right style game called the PriceWise. These are just like a couple of little polls, or rather, it's essentially a little quiz. These are based on food prices, and let's see how good your intuitions for food prices are. Yeah, as a first question, you can either scan the QR code or you can use the link that's been posted there. Just pick 2 items which have the same price. And there are 2 correct answers here. I'm going to pull up the results. And just here's the QR code if people want to quickly scan it. Sorry to moving away from that. Oh, since we consensus is forming around the hash browns and the broccoli. Interesting. And maybe the Tawaki too. Cool. So let's take a quick look at what the real answers are. That's pretty great. Yeah, hash browns and broccoli are about $2.99 there. And the stuffed peppers and milk. That was an odd one. It threw me for a loop when I put this together too. So yeah, I think people didn't see the whole stuffed peppers and milk thing. That seemed unlikely. Yeah, fair enough. But you guys were bang on about this. Cool. Two more questions. The match these three items to their price tag. So these are all classic kind of prices right style games. I'll leave this up. It's a paw. Okay. Again, interesting to see consensus form here. Yeah, cheese can be expensive. All right, let me show you guys the actual numbers. That's some pretty pricey sourdough there. Cool. Yeah, I think we pretty much, I think the second category here is where people landed. And here's one more question. What's the single most expensive purchase recorded in PriceWise? This is an odd one. Definitely threw me for a loop. Yeah, one would think it's salmon. Yeah, and eggs have been going up in price quite a bit. So yeah, that's a good guess. And yeah, gelato sounds like it would be expensive. But yeah, the odd thing is it's milk. I know I was surprised too. Technically, this is a bit of a cheat, depending on how you look at it. It's a pack of 6, I think, a kind of Tetra Pak collection. So yeah, it's still much pricier than I expected, and threw me for the loop when I first saw that someone added that in. But thank you for playing along, folks. Let's continue because that actually highlighted one of the challenges as well that I encountered building PriceWise. Yeah. So I think we touched on this a little bit before, but essentially, in terms of the challenge that I've been facing, there are a couple of short-term challenges and some longer-term challenges. Some of the short-term challenges, one of the main ones, there's a little bit of a bootstrapping and kind of chicken egg issue, right? There needs to be enough receipt data in the system for it to be useful to people, but people are going to use it if there's not enough data. I've been adding a bunch of my receipts here, and I know a bunch of my friends and neighbors have. So some of the ways I'm just trying to spread the word now. Of course, this Open Data Week, and thanks to the team for letting me talk about this. But I'm also hoping in the future to set up in farmers markets, to reach out to people, reach out to a couple of mutual aid organizations, and probably get in touch with my city council member too. If there are other ideas people have for getting the word out about this tool, I'm all ears. One of the other challenges is really messy data. Receipts come in so many shapes and colors and forms, and people are going to take pictures in all sorts of ways. So it can be a little tricky to collect the data from the receipt. But even the data that's in the receipt, because every store uses this data slightly differently and displays this data slightly differently in the systems, you have the same item being called in very different ways. And sometimes, like quantity information is a case in point, especially. Sometimes the receipt says milk, organic milk, whatever, 5.49. In other cases, it says milk, half gallon, 5.49. But both of these are talking about half gallon milk, so it's a little tricky to get this information. So there's a lot of designing that I'm doing, which is dealing with the fact that our information by definition is diverse and somewhat inaccurate. So there's a balance of kind of automatic kind of normalization stuff I'm doing, as well as a bunch of manual kind of curation and using kind of design techniques to group similar information together and things like that. So it's an interesting challenge, but I have a few things that I'm doing to deal with that. There are, however, some longer term challenges here too, for which I don't have the complete answer, but these are here rather as slightly open questions that I'd be curious to see what you folks think too. So one of those is really building with AI. Now, AI systems are non-deterministic, so sometimes the same receipt, the same image sent to the system produces slightly different results. So again, there's a little bit of a balance of, I get a lot of power from these systems. They're able to help bridge that gap between human and machine a little bit better than I could do otherwise. But it also comes with slight variability, and we're really seeing a little bit of different probabilities getting displayed in the data we get. So there's some ways to deal with that. Of course, there's also the broader like elephant in the room problem of like ethical concerns with using these systems, which are built on to some extent IP theft, and like we have real concerns about energy use. I don't have any good answers there, apart from perhaps at some point moving to more specialized models that we build ourselves and train and use ourselves. And I think at some point, costs are probably going to increase. Right now, costs are pretty minimal. I'll kind of touch on that a little bit later. But perhaps in the future, we could move to more specialized models trained for these purposes and use that instead of using these large public models. A couple of other challenges. This is data that the community is putting together. So the community really owns the data. And in a sense, like we often talk about this as collecting data. In the Open Data Week's keynote presentation, Professor Bhargava talked about this idea of often this is not about collecting data as much as creating data. So the entire community is creating a new data set here. How can you make sure that the data is not exploited by others and remains useful for the community? Again, perhaps there are some licensing agreements we can come up with here, or other things like a Creative Commons license, which gives us some foundation for how this data is used in the future. So that's something that I'm thinking about. This is another kind of broad question about transparency. Like we touched on before, there are very few stores, perhaps just a few co-ops, that are truly transparent about their pricing. And I'd like to make sure a tool like this, which is built by the community, also remains transparent about how it works and how it explains how it does the things it does. One part of that is open source in the code, but code, just because you have access to code doesn't mean it's particularly accessible. Even someone like me who has been writing code for many years, I find going to a huge code base intimidating. So I have been wondering if there's other ways we can be transparent about how the system works and so on. So again, something I'm thinking about here. And probably finally, one of the biggest long-term challenges is sustainability. Unfortunately, the system is built on kind of open web technologies, and that guarantees some amount of longevity, but there are real costs. There's web hosting from domain and server costs, which are about $12 to $20 a month. Gemini usage, the AI usage that I mentioned before, it's honestly been really not very much. It's about $11 so far in the last few months, and the multiple hundreds of receipts have uploaded to test the system. So it's not been much, but I'm sure that's going to go up. But obviously, that's that kind of personal time, hundreds of hours of my time that have gone into this. So I'm not sure yet what exactly the right path is to keep this going. I'd love to make sure at some point maybe I can partner with someone and perhaps kind of work on some grants to get more funding and support for this, but just something that I'm continuing to think about. I also want to touch on a few other tools that I've come across over the years, which are doing somewhat similar things. There's a tool called Savvy Prices, which seems to be focused on Vancouver, and another tool called Basket that I've also come across. There are a few tools like this. A lot of them focus on scraping websites of major retailers and aggregating that information. That's pretty useful, but of course, this totally skips all of the mom and pop stores, and New York is full of those, and I'm really happy that those exist, but we have no way to actually get information from those here. There are some tools. I think I came across one called Fetch, which is a little bit more focused on deals, but also aggregates receipt information. That often seems like a kind of a way that these services are focusing on giving you deals, but then are also gathering information. Probably the closest thing to PriceWise that already exists is the open prices system. And they specifically, I think it's part of the open food facts service. The open prices does something very similar to PriceWise, where it gathers data based on pictures people have taken of like price tags in stores or receipts, and gathers all that information together. Unfortunately, it only doesn't have much information for New York. Does have some more information from San Francisco and a lot more in France and a couple of other places, but perhaps at some point it could integrate with them. Possibly the most interesting and inspiring system is Matriskollen. I'm probably like butchering the pronunciation here. It's a Swedish kind of deals and price comparison site. I think it initially started off being focused on deals, but a few years ago in Sweden, there was a bit more of a focus by the Ministry of Finance and Competition Authority. Like they were looking into some of the rapid price increase at various supermarkets, and they essentially encouraged a lot of the big chains there to share a bunch of their data, either scraped or through APIs to services like MicroStore. And so they're able to gather information from all of these different food markets because they've been, well, encouraged to share that information. So they're able to aggregate all of that and put it all together. Perhaps that's a future we could work towards here in the US, which brings me to this my broader vision for PriceWise itself. Like I mentioned before, I'm looking at this as a tool to help people make better informed food purchase decisions, but really in the long run to kind of help support food policies that improve food equity across the city. We're really in the end of phase one now. I've built up all these data structures and infrastructure necessary to hold some of this receipt information. But phase two is where the fun starts, to take the structured data and make it more personally actionable. Essentially, things like you being able to look up prices for your particular neighborhood or for the stores that you shop at. So it makes it a little bit easier for you to act directly on this information. This also includes things like shopping lists. So you can create your own list and then get an estimate of what this is going to cost you when you go shopping, and kind of help you budget and plan a little bit more. Phase three, as I see it, is all about expanding PriceWise to look at this structured data in different ways, using visualizations to look at how prices are varying across different regions in the city and look at how prices are changing over time. And also, this is about expanding accessibility. So right now, there are still hurdles, despite it being a web app, which makes it a little bit more accessible to more people. Maybe offering an SMS interface would mean that you don't even need a smartphone anymore to access some of this information, and perhaps finding ways to include information for people who are shopping with their EBT cards and so on to make it easier for them to find stores that support EBT and what kinds of things they can buy with that. So I'm thinking through some of these things. A lot of phase two and phase three is going to require a lot deeper knowledge about what people's needs are associated with these. So I'd love to partner with other folks who are already thinking about food policy and food access and so on, so I can make this work better. And I kind of touched on the whole kind of sustainability issue here. I would love to connect with other people who are thinking about how to make these sorts of community projects sustainable. And more broadly, like really people who are thinking about how to build and scale these sorts of open data systems. The system works pretty well for the scale it is in right now. If it gets bigger, I would love some support in helping scale this thing. And of course, anyone who's thinking about making data legible, accessible, and actionable in their organizations, I'd love to talk and connect with you. So these are a couple of links. And if you want to reach out to me and go check out PriceWise, these are some ways you can do that. And yeah, and with that, I'll stop and kind of open the floor to questions. So folks, if you have questions, and I'll scroll through the chat as well and see if there are some questions I can answer that I missed before. But thanks again for coming.
Yeah, we have a number of questions and comments in the chat. You've touched on this, but you can give it a chance to reiterate. How did you get this data, and what data sets did you use?
Yeah, the pricing data is, of course, all collected from receipt photographs that people uploaded, and it's all structured and extracted in there. But the other data sets that I used was the retail food stores data set. It's in the open data. This is published by the Department of Agriculture, and it's essentially an entire data set of all the kind of grocery stores across New York State. So it's a pretty big collection. And then I also needed data on which neighborhoods each store was in. So I used the GeoSearch API to take each address and map it to each neighborhood so I can then start filtering prices down to specific neighborhoods and just let people focus a little bit more on their space there. Yeah.
Yep. Can it calculate how far a store is from you in addition to the prices?
Not yet, but I definitely want to add that. I think that would be a great little addition to, especially when you're making shopping lists. If I could be like, hey, I want to walk maybe 3 or 4 miles, but not any further. What's the lowest price I can get in this radius? So I don't want to start building things like that so you can make better decisions about where you shop and what you buy. Yeah. But that's a good idea. Yes.
And what if your receipt is long?
Yeah, you can step back and take like a picture. It does a pretty good job of reading even like somewhat fuzzy and slightly faded receipts. I've been stuffing all my receipts in a little bag so that I can use it for PriceWise, and I discovered a whole bunch of them are faded. But the system still works pretty well at reading some of that. So yeah, just go for it. I haven't tested it with one of those super long CVS receipts, but I worked on receipts which are like that tall and it still works. So yeah, just go for it. Try to include it all in a single.
Yep. This is more of a comment, but I'm not sure if grandmas will be overwhelmed when seeing so many numbers. Maybe less info could be better. Maybe perhaps a simplified version in settings.
That's a good call out. Yeah, it is. It can be a little intimidating to throw all these numbers at people. So partially I was like wondering if an SMS, a little bit of a conversational interface could be fun, where they could just be like, hey, where can I get milk near me? And it just gives you a couple of answers just in text. Maybe that would be, so that is something I'm thinking about, but that's a good call out.
Is there a way to tell when prices were uploaded on PriceWise?
Yes, I have that data. When you go look at, should I actually show you folks that right here? So if you go look at, let's say, a specific item, let's say cheese, I actually have this data about when exactly that receipt was uploaded. That's the date here. So I do have that data. It's just not shown on the other screen. It's just not shown here just for information density reasons. I just tried to keep it a little bit lighter. But by default, this is ordered in the recency order. So the latest information is up here. But I do want to find some ways to flag the sort of age of information so you have some idea of if this is very old or not. But right now, nothing is older than 3 months. But that's a good call out. Yeah.
Can this be expanded to other cities? There's a question about Boston.
Yeah, maybe. I've heard Boston has a pretty good open data kind of policies and stuff as database as well, but I haven't looked into it. But if they do have some of their stores data available, I don't see why not. It should be possible.
It might be perfect to partner with community boards and block associations.
Yeah, I will keep that in mind. Yeah, that's a good idea.
See, maybe you can get a confidence score for item identifying prices when enough people enter the same or similar item.
True. I think that, yeah, that's a good one, just to increase score for things where multiple people have verified that score, price. That's a good point. So yeah, I will keep that in mind. Yeah, thank you.
This is an interesting one. So most items in the store have a unique barcode associated with them. Is it possible to standardize some of the data by scanning the barcodes and associated prices of the items in the store? I believe the barcode for almond breeze, bar milk should be the same in every store. Also, how does this app account for the sale items on a receipt?
Yeah, both good questions. Yeah, for the former with the barcode, yes, that is like I think it's a kind of global standard. I think the UPS standard, I might be wrong, but I did look into that. I haven't integrated that in yet, but that could be an interesting way for people to just, I think actually the Open Food Facts tool does this, where you can take a picture of the barcode of the box or a picture of the sort of price label in the store, and it reads the barcode from there and chooses the item there. I haven't done that yet, but that's a good thing for me to think about. Yeah, I think maybe it's like the UPC code. And sorry, what was the second question?
How does this app account for sale items on receipt?
Oh, of course. Yeah, it doesn't. So that's something I want to include. Again, it's one of those situations where some receipts have them, some of them don't. Some receipts have a little line which just says markdown and this amount. I do need to work on gathering that information as well and perhaps incorporating it into the price itself so you can see what the regular price is and what the markdown price is. because of course the markdowns may not always last. So that would be useful. So that's something on my to-do list for sure, but good call out. Yeah.
Another question, what about people who do things like online shopping, Instacart, Fresh to Rat, where the receipts are more standardized?
Yeah, I have gotten this question a bunch of times. Right now, mostly my focus has been on like the local kind of physically access, but I've noticed at least one person who's just taken a picture of the receipt on their computer screen and scanned that in, and the system accepts it, it works. So that's a weird kind of roundabout way of doing it. That is something I'm thinking about as well, of including that in the system, but I'll put that on my list.
With the rise of dynamic pricing in the grocery stores, how do you anticipate this tool keeping up?
Yeah, it's going to be tricky because, of course, prices are changing that rapidly. How much can you rely on this information? The prices are changing fast. My hope is that we can get like a good, with enough data, have a solid range so you can still make some good decisions about where these prices lie. The other aspect of this, which you touched on in an earlier question, is the whole kind of deals and coupons sort of situation. Prices do change through the week. So I have a plan to, a lot of these larger retail stores publish their like coupon like flyers every week or so. I'm hoping to scan all of those in so I can highlight deals and stuff here. But yeah, it is a challenge. If prices are changing much faster than something like that, then people can upload receipts. How much can we believe some of this data? I'm hoping that some of these averages and medians that we're able to calculate would help people still make some good decisions there. Yeah,
Right.
but good question.
Another question here about just the usability. Do you have an overview, instructions, like a doc or a video or short? The app is intuitive, but would be nice to be able to share a quick intro or how to with potential users.
That isn't. I had one, but that was pretty old, and so I ended up taking it down. But I'm going to record another and include that in like the somewhere in the app itself, so people can quickly do a how to. But that's good call out. Yeah, thank you. Oh, I just noticed another question here. Have you considered having two price ranges, one for big box stores and one for local stores? Yes, actually, I was thinking that might be interesting to have make a distinction between sort of chain stores and local stores. So that is something I'm thinking about here because yeah, like they both operate slightly differently, and I want to make sure here that the small stores actually have a good say here as well, so people can make the right decision about where they want to purchase. But that's a good call.
Right. This is a different use case, but wondering if you talked with BLS statisticians that help calculate price indices. A lot of price data goes into those. A long shot, but it's possible that this tool could help them and that there may be a procurement process for a version of this.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I did look into some of the, because I think they use like a basket of goods to track sort of price inflation of food and so on. So I have looked at some of those stats, but I have not actually talked to anyone or figured out how I could include some of that information here. But perhaps that could be useful to have in the app itself. I also heard a piece of information I could include here on in a similar vein is perhaps like prices that the Park Slope Food Co-op has. Now we know that they have a flat 25% markup on wholesale prices, so we kind of have some idea of what wholesale prices are and what the prices we are actually being charged are. So it could be a good way to anchor some of the pricing that we're seeing.
In its current form, what is the capacity for receipt data for the tool? Like the number of uploads and users, and have you done outreach to encourage people to use the platform?
This is the outreach. I've also otherwise been talking to a bunch of friends and neighbors and passing the word around. Definitely the plan is to continue that, maybe go find some farmers markets to set up at, and also get in touch with a couple of mutual aid organizations over in the various neighborhoods. As to what the app can handle, I don't know yet. I've made some design decisions here, so it handles like a decent amount of data, and I've been testing it with as much as 3,000 to 4,000 different purchases, and the system works fine. So I think it can go a lot further, but let me know if it's glitching too much. I think we saw a little glitch earlier today, just needed a retry, but something like that, I will be continuing to test and push the system to see how it works.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have now heard a bunch of people talking about the sort of pricing information in other areas. One, of course, came up about sort of restaurants and that kind of thing. So I know in the food policy space, we talk about food at home and food away from home. So perhaps there is room for something like that in the app. Again, since we're focused on food access, it's something I'm thinking about. But yeah, beyond that, into the healthcare sector and so on, yeah, I don't know much about the space, but that is something I'll keep in the back of my mind. But I agree. I think it would be good to have that kind of information more easily usable and accessible. Thanks so much, everyone. This was great. Thanks for joining.